And we're gonna be learning the Gemara Sukkah on page 10. Just tell me a little. How do you follow along? Do you have a Gemara? Do you have a copy of something? Shalom Aleichem, Reb David.
Yeah, hi, Rabbi Smith. Most of us have a Gemara. We follow on like an online Gemara.
Okay. Okay. So let's begin right away. There's a new Mishnah here. 1 second, I'm just admitting there's a new Mishnah. This must be like the 3rd or 4th Mishnah since the beginning of the chapter. You're learning about the Sukkah, and specifically the walls and the schach of the Sukkah. So you learned about how high a Sukkah is allowed to be, and probably about how low a Sukkah is allowed to be, and the minimal dimensions of a Sukkah, which would be 7 handbreadths by 7 handbreadths. The minimal height of a sukkah would be 10 handbreadths. The maximum height would be 20 cubits. It was very tall. Then we were discussing in the last section what you're allowed to use for the schach, for the roofing for the sukkah. So you learned that you can't build a sukkah in a house, and you can't build it under a tree. There were three laws here. You can't build a sukkah even under another sukkah. You can't have a double-decker sukkah. That would be prohibited under the same rule that it says that you should build a sukkah and not more than one, right? You would only have one sukkah, and that would go on as a sukkah in the house would also be problematic. Well, in this Mishnah that you're studying, we're talking about using material that would be prohibited for roofing, for stuff, because it's mekabel tumah. It's susceptible to impurity. Now, what would make it susceptible to impurity? Well, anything that's a vessel, that means it has some sort of use, is susceptible to impurity. Now, impurity would be if came in contact with a corpse, or a man that was impure, or a woman that was impure, touched it, or sat on it, or something like that. That would become impure. Well, this doesn't need to be impure. This needs to, if it's susceptible to impurity, it's already a problem, even if it's still pure, because anything that's a vessel cannot be used for the schach. Now, what's our source for schach, of what material it needs to be? So the Gemara is going to tell us later on that when it says the season of when the holiday of Sukkot is done, the season for Sukkot is when you gather in the produce of your granary, of your threshing floor, and when you gather in the produce of your wine press. That's the season for Sukkot. And the Hebrew word for that is and you will gather that in. Now, the Talmud tells us that based on those words, when it's telling us the season, based on that words, it also tells us what type of material we should be using. It's the type of material that was collected from the threshing floor and from the wine or olive press, which would mean that it's material that grows from the ground, and it also means that it's material that's not susceptible to impurity, because we're not talking about the fruit itself. The fruit itself or the wine itself would be susceptible to impurity, or the olive oil. But we're talking about the waste products. So that the waste products of that, which, let's say, for example, the threshing floor, what would be the waste product of the threshing floor? That would be the straw that's left over after you take the grain out of the husk, right? And what would be the leftover, the waste products from the olive press? Would be the stems, the peels, and the pits. That would be the waste product. So all of that is acceptable to be used for schach. So if you would make your schach out of the original material, what it says in the text, you would end up with grass, straw, like wheat grass, the straw from the wheat, you would end up with stems, pits, and peels of olives and grapes. Now, we've extended that it doesn't need to be specifically that. It just needs to be anything that grows from the ground and is not considered a vessel. That doesn't, and it can't be attached to the ground. That's another rule. That's going to come up later. Okay, so now the Mishnah started off with Pirs alei asadin mipnei achama itachta mipnei hanishai. If someone built a sukkah, he built the sukkah properly. Everything's nice. It meets all the requirements. The only problem is that he spread out a sheet over the top of the sukkah because the sun rays were too strong. And even though he has enough shade to make his sukkah kosher, but I'm going to explain it according to Rashi. Tosfos has slightly different analysis of it. So if he spreads out a sheet on top of the sukkah, that's just to cut out a little bit extra of the sunlight, which the sukkah's kosher anyway, but he just wants to cut out a little bit more sunlight. Or he puts a sheet, talking about a sheet like a bed sheet, or he puts that sheet under the schach to catch the falling leaves, that there was like debris that would fall down, and that the foliage that would come off the tree. He doesn't want that falling in, so he put up this net or this sheet underneath the schach to catch that. So now it turns out is that he's in a sukkah, but he's in a sukkah that has another covering either on top or under it, and that could disqualify him, because is he in a sukkah or is he under a sheet? Now imagine someone going into the sukkah wearing his hat. Is he in the sukkah or is he in his hat? So he's in the sukkah. We don't say that the hat disqualifies the sukkah, right? If someone goes into a sukkah under an umbrella, that would be an interesting discussion, because we would say, is he in the sukkah or is he in an umbrella? What's going to come up on the next page is if someone has a bed that's like a canopy, and he would sleep in the sukkah, which that's one of the requirements. You're supposed to eat, drink, and sleep in the sukkah. So if he would be sleeping in the sukkah in that canopy, would he be considered in the sukkah or would he be considered in the canopy under that bed? Well, here he's in the sukkah and he's also under the sheet. So the Mishnah tells us that it's possible. It's invalid. Simply because that sheet is there, then that sheet was there for the reason of to cut out some sunlight, so it's giving shade, or it's protecting him from the falling leaves. That would make it invalid. Then the Mishnah adds in, if he spreads the sheet over this is a type of canopy over a bed, but the way it's done is that if I have a bed and I have two poles on either end of the bed, one by the head and one by the feet, then I put a pole in between the two. So it would be more like like what you would hang coats on, sometimes in front of a shul or something. There's like this movable rack, or in a store they have these movable racks where they can hang garments on. So it would be like a pole going across and two poles going down. And if there would be a bed right underneath that, and then what you would do is you would take a sheet and hang it over the top, and it would come down diagonally. Or there's sometimes when people camp, they do this. They want to keep the mosquitoes out, so they make a mosquito net that covers the bed, and they would have it would come down like a canopy, like a triangle. So someone sleeps in his bed that has that sort of canopy over it. That's going to be that's going to be acceptable. I'm sorry. The kinef is the opposite. The kinef has four posts. It's a full canopy. The kinef has the full canopy. The naklite is what the Mishnah said. Okay, so the kinef it says is puzzle. Actually, the Hebrew word kinef is similar to the English word canopy. Kinef, canopy. So the same consonant. That would be a real canopy. And however, naklite naklite is acceptable. That's the one post on each end. What's the difference between these two types of canopies? One is triangular and one is flat on the top. Why would one be acceptable and one not be acceptable? Any ideas?
So I think we already learned that if it doesn't have a tefach flat, that makes a difference.
Very good. So the tefach flat would make it into an ayhel, and once it's an ayhel, then it's considered that you're in something else other than in a sukkah. When it doesn't have that tefach, so it doesn't have any status, it's more like you're in your hat, you're wearing your hat, and that's not considered that you're in something else. It's just considered you, and you're dressed up. You know, it doesn't make it into a separate entity. Okay, so comes along the Gemara, and it says, Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, Leishana al Meknei an Ashar. When the Gemara says, first let me tell you about Rav Chisda. He was a Kohen. It's easy to remember because a Kohen is the attribute of Chesed. And his name was Rav Chisda. So that's the Kabbalistic description for the Kohen matches here. He was a son-in-law of the son-in-law of Rav, who was a great teacher in the Yeshiva in Surah. I believe his father-in-law was Anan Barava, and who was the son-in-law of Rav. So came from that family, a very important teacher, and he was the father-in-law of Rava, and he was also the father-in-law of Rami Bar Chama. He was also the father-in-law of Marukva Bar Chama. He was a very important teacher. Now, usually whenever we have a Mishnah, right after a Mishnah, you would have first or second generation Amira that would come in and qualify what the Mishnah is referring to. So you would have Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav, common 5-word statement in the whole shop. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, and they would say the Mishnah is only talking about such and such. That's a very typical Gemara. Over here we skip 2 generations. We get to Rav Chisda, and we say that that Leishanu Ella. Now the phrase Leishanu Ella literally means it was not taught only. That's very difficult to translate in English. In English, you would have to say Leishanu Ella. This was not taught at all, except in the following case. That's how you would have to translate it. So the easier way to translate that is Leishanu Ella is you drop the lie because it's a double negative. You drop one of them and you just say Leishanu Ella. This was only taught. Ella can be translated as only. So if you drop the lie, it's easier to translate. It says Amar Rav Chisda Leishanu Ella. This was only taught Mipnei Hanashar. If this sheet, this protection that was put over or under, in this case, under the schach, in order to collect the foliage that was falling down, that is only if it was put there in order to collect those leaves that are falling down. Aval and Isa, but if it was put for decoration, then Kshera, it's going to be kosher. That's Rav Chisda, how he qualifies the Mishnah. The Mishnah says this blanket statement that, a sheet is going to make the sukkah invalid. Comes by Rav Chisda says, not so fast. And it's not every case. It's only going to be in the case where it's put there to collect the leaves that are dropping under the spot. We learned this only according to the way Rashi learns it. Tosfos, if you have a traditional Gemara, Tosfos on the outer side of the page, he's learning that the sheet over here that's invalidating the sukkah is either it's on top of the schach or it's under the schach. If it's on top of the schach, then the sun is so strong that it's causing the schach to dry out. And within a few days, you're not going to have any schach left. So you put a sheet on it to protect the schach. So otherwise, you're not going to have schach. So now the sheet is not just the sheet that's cutting out some extra sunlight, but the sheet is actually part of your schach. And without it, you don't have schach. So it's actually validating your sukkah. So that is more problematic. So according to Rabbeinu Tam, comes out of big leniency that if you were putting up a sheet, not because you're worried about your schach falling down or you drying out and crumbling, then this may still be valid. What's it talking about when you put the sheet under it to collect the fallen leaves? According to Rabbeinu Tam, he says that if the leaves would all fall down, then you won't have enough shade. So you put this up sort of like to hold it in. It's like a netting to hold the leaves in place so you have enough shade. Yeah. So, but comes along Rav Chisda, and Rav Chisda says that the whole problem of the Mishnah is only if it was put up to catch the falling leaves. But if it was put up for decorations, Rav Chisda, very surprisingly, says that it's going to be acceptable. The Gemara asks a question. The Gemara says that Rav Chisda could be saying the statement and could be telling me a chiddush, something novel, something that I didn't know before, if the Mishnah itself didn't qualify its own statement. But the Mishnah itself qualified the statement. The Mishnah itself said that you're allowed to put a sheet, that you're not allowed to put a sheet under the skach to catch the falling leaves, mipnei hanashar, because of the falling leaves. That's what it says. Comes like Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, oh, only mipnei hanashar, only because of the falling leaves. Well, the Gemara says, Pshita. I know that. If the Mishnah wouldn't have said mipnei hanashar, then Rav Chisda would have come along and would have told me something interesting. It says, you know what the Mishnah is saying? When the Mishnah says you can't spread a sheet, it's only in a specific case. But since the Mishnah itself said that it's only in a specific case, so what's Rav Chisda adding? That it's only in a specific, it's exactly what the Mishnah says. Mipnei hanashar tanan. So it says in the Mishnah, mipnei hanashar. Okay. So the Gemara gives me an interesting answer, and it's like analyzing the precision of the text of the Mishnah. It says Mahu Detema. If you have a traditional Gemara, it has a mem dalad there. That stands for Mahu Detema. What might you have said? An abbreviation. What might you have said? You might have said that Hu Adin Afilu Lena Isa. I know the Mishnah qualified itself and it said that it's because of you're catching the falling leaves. I know that. However, I could have explained the Mishnah that it doesn't actually need to be only in that specific case. Maybe the Mishnah was just telling me a typical case. That why would you put a sheet under the stuff if you already people hang sheets on their under their ceiling? Why would they do it? Well, this is a case where you didn't want to catch the falling leaves. But it's not telling me a halacha. Maybe it's just telling me a scenario where that would make sense. So when it says over here, "Hu adin afilu na'isa," really the Mishnah, the same law would apply even if you're coming to decorate your sukkah. I diktanim mipnei hanashar. This that the Mishnah said because of the falling leaves. Orcha de milsa katani was coming to tell me just a classical case where someone would put spread a sheet under his roof. He already has a roof and he's spreading a sheet under it, probably spreading it just to catch the falling leaves. Sometimes when people learn Gemara, they say, why would anyone do that? We start to learn the beginning of the Masechta. Why would anyone make a sukkah over 20 amas? So you'd have to figure out why someone would want to do that. They say, why would someone make a sukkah so small, under 10 tefachim? Okay. Why would someone want to spread a sheet under his stuff? So, okay, this is the reason why he wanted to. But not that we're telling me that the halacha only applies in such a case. That's just a scenario of when someone would typically want to do this. But maybe his kach was pine needles, and that's what they did in in New York. It's usually pine trees, the evergreen. And when it falls down, it could be a little frustrating or annoying when it keeps falling down the back of your shirt. So you spread the sheet underneath the skach to catch those falling leaves. Okay, so I could have thought that was not because the halacha would change if you did it for a different reason. Comes along Rav Chisda and says, no, actually, the halacha changes if you do it for a different reason. If that sheet was ornamental, was a decorative sheet, and you put it there because it looked nice, then that would actually be acceptable. It's very surprising. According to Rav Chisda, you're allowed to sit in a sukkah. You're sitting under the skach. Under the skach is a sheet going from wall to wall, covering everything, and you're still going to be considered in the sukkah because the sheet that's under the skach is not there to protect to protect you from the falling leaf. It's not there to protect like Rabbeinu Tam. It's not there to stop the shade from decreasing, because the leaves would fall down and then you won't have enough shade. It's there just ornamental, then that would be acceptable. Very, very surprising chiddush of Rav Chisda. Okay. Kamash Malan, the Chiddush comes to teach me that it's acceptable. Yeah.
So does that mean that the person they have to know the intent when the person is it the person's kavanah? Was that what
That's what's
caused
going to
this
come out.
thing?
That kavana,
So how do we know we walk in a sukkah, two people walk into the sukkah, and one person and the owner's not there, and then one person says, "Oh, this sukkah is pasul," because there's a sheet, and the other person says, "No, maybe he put it as a decoration." In other words, the only way to know is what the person intent was to start with, or
Yeah, that would come out. At least that's what some of the commentaries understand this is that it's totally intent. What his intent was. I have other examples of that if you're interested. Other examples where the intent would actually make a difference in the construction. And, if someone built a sukkah, and depending on his intention, that would make a difference. In other words, just the observable dimensions of the sukkah will not tell you enough. You had it a page ago when someone built a sukkah according to Beis Shammai, if it was from the previous year. It won't be somewhere during the year. It won't be acceptable, depending on what his kavanah was. Now, if that's Beis Shammai, we know Beis Shammai holds that you need kavanah for the sukkah. Let's ignore Beis Shammai. According to Beis Hillel, well, Tosfos learns that you still have to be machadish something, even in that old sukkah. I don't know if we went into that Tosfos, but according to Beis Hillel, there was also some things that a person needed to do, even though the sukkah looks perfectly fine, exactly the same. Then there's going to be some other interesting ways where someone builds a sukkah, and if he had built the sukkah in a proper way, let's say, for example, well, you won't be able to tell if just by observing if it's a kosher sukkah. You would have to know previously. This is not specifically intent. But let's say there was a vine that was attached to the ground and then it covered the sukkah. It's not considered valid schach when it's still growing. This discussion why when it's still growing is it invalid? But whatever the case is, it is invalid. So if someone comes along and snips it, so it's a machlekes if that's acceptable, because it became kosher only after it was built. And the way a sukkah is supposed to be built is it's supposed to be built kosher initially kosher, not to be kosherized later on. So that would be someone would walk into a sukkah and just by observing, he would not know if the sukkah is kosher, because he doesn't know if that vine was snipped before it was placed over it or not. There is another example of this where the intent would make a difference. Someone puts up schach not for shade, or he builds a sukkah not for shade. He builds it for tznius, for modesty or something. So that could be problematic. But that would probably also follow Beis Shammai's view. That would probably follow Beis Shammai's view. And there's another discussion that's going to come up in several pages. But if someone puts up boards, actually, there's a better example. If someone puts up bundles, and it's bundled straw, there would be a difference if it's a biblically if you put it up on the sukkah in order to dry out, and then later why? Because that was a nice frame for it to dry the grain or something, to dry the wood, and then later on he decided, hey, you know what? It's almost sukkah, and I have those bundles of wood up there. Let me just use it as my schach. So that would be biblically his intention. Would not make it kosher. But just by changing of his mind, it would not make it kosher. Over there, the changing of his mind would not work. There is another example with the boards where someone could remove the plaster off the roof of his house and then leave the boards there. And the boards may be kosher. The discussion later on in the Gemara, but there would be a difference between if he put the boards on, put the plaster on, and then remove the plaster, and then whatever he did to the boards, that would be kosher. But if he had never put the plaster on, and he was just building his house initially before he put the plaster on, it would be not kosher. Even though when you walk in, it would be look exactly the same. It would still be a distinction based on what happened previously or based on intent. Yeah. So the intent could actually affect it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Yeah, we started to talk about last time, but we didn't come to a conclusion about building a sukkah under a tree. And was there a difference between building a sukkah under a tree or building the sukkah and then the tree grew over it?
I think the difference would be, actually, I'm not sure if there is a difference. Not sure if there is a difference. I know that if someone builds a sukkah, I know that there's a discussion about building a sukkah. Let's say someone has a removable roof. He builds a sukkah before he removes the roof. And then he removes the roof afterwards. I don't remember if there's a distinction there. If when he built it the first time it had to be open or it didn't have to be open, but definitely when he closes it, because let's say he closes it because of the rain, something, some people have a shlach, they call it, that covers it protects the sukkah from the rain. You're not supposed to sit in the sukkah when the shlach is on. Actually, that's very relevant to this Mishnah right here, because, especially to the Chisda, because you could say that, one second, why not? It's not, well, let's say according to Rabbeinu Tam, it's really applicable, because according to Rabbeinu Tam, it's not, why would a sheet over my sukkah make a difference? It's only if I didn't have enough shade in the first place. The sheet is helping me have the shade. This shlach that's going over the sukkah is like a sheet, it's a waterproof sheet, but it's a sheet that's going over the sukkah. It's probably makabel tumah of some sort, and but nevertheless, it's not protecting my schach. It's not making my schach kosher, according to Rabbeinu Tam. So maybe according to Rabbeinu Tam, that would be acceptable to eat in the sukkah with the shlach on. Can I compare this? But let's do this better. Let's compare this without Rabbeinu Tam. Let's compare this to Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says that if you have decorative ornaments, something that's in the sukkah, it doesn't invalidate the sukkah, even if it's covering all the stuff or covering you under the stuff. So this is quite decorative. I mean, I'm not doing it I'm doing it to protect the rain that's falling through. I think this would make a difference between Rabbeinu Tam versus Rashi in the way I learn this. Am I doing this to protect the stach, which I'm not doing this here to protect the stach. The stach is kosher anyway. But I am doing this not for decorative purposes. Unless somehow I could say that what is decoration? Decoration makes it more comfortable for me to be in the sukkah. It's more pleasant. So when I put up that shlach, it's just making it more pleasant. On the other hand, if I learn, it gets a little confusing. But if I learn like Rabbeinu Tam, then I could hear someone saying that, according to Rabbeinu Tam, that you could eat in that this year is not a halacha year. No one should, disclaimer. But just in the in understanding the logic here, according to Rashi, though, according to Rashi, when you put up the sheet under the stop to collect the falling leaves, so that would be very similar to putting up a shlach to stop the rain from coming in. It would be exactly the same. It would be invalid, according to Rashi.
Rabbi?
Specific to decorations, so it's not. I'm sorry, someone was saying something?
What about lattice underneath the schach? How does that,
Who's asking that? Let me just say, I can't see over here.
Moshe, my name's Moshe. I'm not visible, but I'm just
Okay.
curious.
Okay.
Yes.
Lattice is a very interesting discussion. Now, if you have a traditional Gemara and you look back one page, exactly like where we are, one page back, Rashi actually uses the word lattice in his French. He actually says the word lattice. He says the word lattice. Rashi is very lenient about lattice on the sukkah. He says that it does not disrupt the validity of the sukkah. He says the schach that's on top of the lattice separates the pieces of lattice, will not be considered that it's entirely closed, and the schach that you put on top of it will be acceptable. There's a very modern discussion about putting a screen on your sukkah. Now, can you use a screen for the wall? Well, there's a discussion if it blows in the wind. Let's say it doesn't blow. You made it nice and tight. It doesn't blow. You put like small frames over there, so each one is like solid. So you have screen walls. That seems like it would be acceptable, even though there's holes, more holes than space, but it doesn't matter. It's lovely. Lovely means that everything is considered solid. So let's say I made the walls from screen, screen as in like the mosquitoes. You got mosquitoes with screens on the window, and then I went over the top too. I put the screen on the top. Very similar to the lattice discussion. Would that be acceptable? And there are rabbis today that hold that it is acceptable. I don't do it, even though I would love to, but try to be a little more strict, like those other opinions. But theoretically, that could be acceptable because the stop that's in between the spaces, in between that, is enough, would be valid. And I won't consider. So it would work like this. I would consider the screen a solid wall, and I won't consider it a solid roof, based on just on halakha, because I say lavud lakula, but I don't say lavud lakuma. Another discussion. So I would say lavud that it's considered solid when it helps me, but I don't. Sorry. Yeah, can you hear me? Is that good? Yeah. So sometimes the phone calls.
Yes.
But I won't say that it's solid to disrupt the validity. That's an interesting discussion. If it ever becomes relevant, you have to discuss this with the rabbi. But theoretically, there's room to have that lenience.
If you go into Home Depot by the lattices, there's wooden lattice and then there's plastic lattice.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between one to the other?
Is there a difference between one to the other? I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure.
Because the plastic would be a couple too, I'm thinking.
Yeah. Plastic has one thing that's worse. The question is if that really matters. It may not matter because if you have more stock than that, it may be acceptable. Yeah, it may be acceptable. I'm not sure if it really matters. I'd have to look into that. Yeah. Okay. The Gemara says a very good point. The Gemara says, Lema Messiah late. Let us say that the following brisa, it's actually a quote from a Tosefta. The Tosefta were the Mishnayos that didn't make it in. There's brisas. The Aramaic word brisa means far, it means outside. It's left out of the edited Mishnayos. Tosefta means like was added in. So this was it was added on. It was edited by Reb Chia and Reb Oishia, students of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, of Rabbi Danasi. They put together these brises. Now we have a brisa that could support Reb Chizda. Again, Reb Chizda is like the second or third generation Amira, but we're going back now to a Tanaic source that seems to prove that Reb Chizda is correct. Reb Chizda said that when do we say a sheet would invalidate a sukkah? That's only if it's put there to catch the falling leaves. And then we had two interpretations, Rashi's and Rabbi Natan. But Rav Chizda said, but if you put it up for decoration for ornamental purposes, the sukkah is going to be valid. I think the simple explanation why would it be valid is because we consider it bottle to the stock. It's there just to decorate the stock. And when it's there just to decorate the stock, then we don't consider it an independent entity. We consider it nullified to the stock. And therefore it would be acceptable, which is, again, it's a big surprise. It's a chiddush. But it doesn't seem like anyone is arguing on that. Lema Messiah, let us say that the following Tosefta, the following brisa is going to be a support to the statement of Rav Pizda. It says, someone makes a sukkah, puts up the stock properly. The itra, and he decorates it. The kromim, decorated sheets, or the sadinim, or embroidered sheets. Hamitsuyarim, that are decorated with pictures on them. The talaba goizim, he hung up walnuts. Shkedim are almonds. Farsikin are peaches. Berimayim are pomegranates. Parchile anavim. This is clusters of grapes by the stem. The piece of the vine is there. The itres shel shibalim. Itres shel shibalim would be a wreath of wheat. It would be like a round circle. Some other religions hang that up on the doors. Nothing to do with that, but it's the shape of that. Like a Yenis is wines. That would be hard to hang up wine, but if you had it in a glass jug or something, maybe with a little loop on the ring or something, you could hang it up. So the same thing would be shamanim. I think I've seen oils in small decorative jars that could be hanging. I've seen that with like a cork in it or something. Salasais, or maybe flour that also could be hanging. Maybe there's different colors, or there were different jars that were hanging. And this would be decorations, classic sukkah decorations, besides for pictures of great rabbis. In those days, they would hang fruits and other stuff, real fruit. Today, sometimes you see plastic fruit. So they were hanging different peaches and pomegranates and oils. So the halacha is that what we're quoting this, and I'm going to go back, why are we quoting this? But the halacha is also listapik man. Even though some of these things are edible, but you're not allowed to make use of them during the holiday. Ad Maitzah Yom Tov Ha'achin Shel Chag. You turn the page, we're on top of 10b. Until the last day of the holiday, until the end of the holiday. Okay. There's a discussion here about what happens after that. But I'll leave that for when we study about the Esther. You're allowed to eat the Esther on Shmini Atzeret later on in the Masechta, in the last chapter.
Can you say that again? You're fading out a little bit. Your voice is not so good.
There's a discussion about when this prohibition ends. But right now we see that you're allowed to eat it on Shmini Atzeret, Yom Tov Ha'achin Shel Chag. I'm sorry, that you can't eat it on Shmini Atzeret. You'd have to wait till after Shmini Atzeret to eat it. And there's a discussion comparing this to the Esther, which may be permissible on Shmini Atzeret. Now, what we just said is that you can't make use of the decorations that are put in the sukkah until after the holiday of sukkah. There's a possibility here of in hisna aleim, that if someone made a condition when he put them up, hakolafi tonight, he made a condition. He says, "I'm putting these up to the decorations, but I'm still going to use it if I need it." So then that would be acceptable. He would be allowed to. What we're learning here is the laws of muktzah. The original law of muktzah is when someone says, I'm not using this on Shabbat. I'm not using this on Yom Tov. He designates it out of use. He designates it out of use. Yeah, there's a secondary level of muktzah where it hasn't been designated for use. That's where, but everyone agrees. There's a machlekes Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda in Masechta Shabbos about muktzah. Everyone agrees something that's designated out of use. If someone actually would say this is not being used on Shabbos or Yom Tov, that it's 100% muktzah. So because this person put it up for decorations, so he's designating it out of use, it becomes real muktzah. It becomes muktzah. So it's designated out of use. However, if he made a condition, he says, I'm not designated out of use. Just right now, I'm hanging it up here. It looks really nice. If I need a peach in the middle of the holiday, I'm going to just take it down. So that would be acceptable according to this. Now, why did we mention this? What's our point? This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. We're talking about sheets. And if the Chisda said that if you hang up a sheet that for decorations, it's going to be kosher. Well, when we looked at this Tosefta, it says that if you hung up sheets with decorations, ornamental sheets or embroidered sheets, that you can't use it. Which sounds like that the sukkah is kosher. You just can't take it down or can't make use of it or whatever. But it sounds like the sukkah is kosher, which is a strong proof to Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said that the sukkah is kosher if you put up a sheet under the stock, not to catch the falling leaves, but you put it up for ornamental purposes. The sukkah is kosher. Well, guess what? The Tosefta says the same thing. We go back to a Tanaic source, and we're able to have a support for Rav Chisda, who's a later Amira, early Amira, but later than the Tanaic source, that it's going to be acceptable. The Gemara says, not necessarily is this going to be a source. Dilma minatzad. We didn't say where you're hanging the sheets up. We didn't say you're hanging the sheets from wall to wall under the stock. We didn't say that. Maybe you hung it up on the wall. Maybe it's like one of those, those canvas sukkahs where they tie them down tight so that they're kosher. They tie it carefully so they don't blow in the wind. But there's all types of decorations on them, words and everything. We didn't say that it's hanging on under the stock, so that we don't have any support from that Tosefta. Okay. Once we mention that where we're hanging the sukkah, the Gemara now quotes a statement of Amirayim. It introduces it with the word itmar. Itmar, it has been stated. The word itmar is a compound.
Rabbi, yeah. I saw a discussion a few years ago where a person, he has decorations on his wall, and one of the decorations he has is esrogim. And then his main esrog that he's using for lulav and esrog becomes puzzle. So now the question is, can he take off the esrog from his wall decorations and use that to bench lulav and esrog? And I think the answer was yes, because lulav and esrog is from the Torah, it's midaraisa, and the muksa is the midarabanan.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. That's do you remember where you saw that? Because you could get into it. I'm sorry?
Yeah. It was a discussion in the Jewish press.
Oh, wow. Okay. There's some good stuff in there.
Yeah.
Rabbi class. Yeah, that's a very interesting bringing up. You have a rabbinic law that doesn't allow you to take it. You have a biblical law that's telling you to take it. And my only question on that is that taking the esrog, well, I would have to say that we're talking about taking esrog on the first day. Because if you're taking it on the later days of Sukkot, the second or third, the second day maybe we would do it. But let's say the days of Palamayid, we would say that that's also rabbinic. That was an institution by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to remember the temple where they took the lulav and esrog. So I would have two rabbinic laws there. I would have a rabbinic law to take the esrog all 7 days, and I would have the rabbinic law that it's muktzah. Yeah. So, but if we would limit it to the first day and put the discussion on the first day or second day, then I hear what you're saying. That I have a biblical law that says I need to take the lulav, or take it on the first day. For rabbinic law that it's muktzah, maybe it would override it. Yeah. Yes, the Gemara later on, I don't remember if it's the Gemara itself or if I think it's the Gemara itself that quotes someone had 7 esrogim, and every day he would make the bracha on it, and then the next day he would eat it. You see, you're not allowed to eat the esrog during Sukkot. It's huktzah l'mitzvasa. It's designated for the mitzvah. That's why we're not even supposed to smell it. I think that could be problematic. It's designated not for personal benefit. It's designated for the mitzvah. It smells delicious, but they used to use that nice flax. Remember, that's like that looked like a hair that would go in. I don't know what it
I
was.
think it was like horsehair or something.
Horsehair. Yeah, that would be nice. That
Instead
would
of the,
smell real nice with the estrag.
now
Estrag.
now the synthetic foam, but they used to have that old horsehair wrapped in and then
Yeah, that was great.
wrapped
They
around.
make big beards out of it. Yeah, yeah. So, but there's a problem to even smell it. So, but according to that one sage that would have 7 esrogim, he would designate one per day. That would mean that the following day, or maybe after he fulfilled the mitzvah, was already eligible for use, similar to the condition that's in this brisa, where a person can make a condition that he's only going to designate his decorations if he doesn't need them. But if he's going to take them on a certain day, or maybe if he needs them, he can designate that he's going to use it. That would be acceptable. Yeah. So now we have a statement from Amiraim. The way the Gemara introduces a statement of Amiraim called a memra, the statement of Amiraim, it uses the word itmar. And itmar is a compound word. The prefix is is, which means there is. And the second part of it is mar, which means to say, like amar. So it is amar. It has been stated. That's the way it introduces Amiraim. Usually when it introduces it, it's usually a machlokes. It's not always, but usually it's a machlokes. Itmar, it has been stated. Noi sukkah, decorations of a sukkah, ein mematim the sukkah. They don't diminish the size of the sukkah. Now, we said that there's the maximum height of a sukkah, 20 amos. Let's say someone makes a sukkah 21 amos tall. Problem. Yeah. If it's exactly 20, that's a discussion. 2 versions in the first Mishnah. If it's l'mayla me'asamama, if it means above 20, or if it means 20. Or if it means exactly 20. There's 2 versions for that. I'm not sure which way the halacha goes. But let's say it's 21 amos, and then he puts in decorations that lower it down by an amma. So would it be kosher? So the first statement is over here that ein memaitin, it does not diminish. The sukkah is still invalid. Let's go the other way. Let's say that the minimal size of the sukkah is 10 tefachim. You have to crouch down to get in. It'd be similar to like crawling under a table. A table is about 10 tefachim, a little under 10 tefachim, but it would be crawling under a stender size. You're crawling into something. But now in that, it was perfectly the kosher size, but with the decorations, it's going down a little bit more. That would not invalidate the sukkah. Decorations don't count. They don't invalidate, and they don't make it kosher. They don't do it. They don't do either. Well, comes along Rav Ashi, Amar Rav Ashi, uminatzad b'matin. If it's on the side, then it would diminish the size. Now, this is something that let me pose this to you and see how you can figure out how can you differentiate between these 2 halachas. The decorations, let's say it's sheets. If I put it on the top of the sukkah and I let it hang down a little bit, I say that it doesn't diminish the size, whether it's 10 tefachim or 20 amos. When I put it on the walls, I say the minimal size of a sukkah, the width and the length of the sukkah, is 7 tefachim by 7 tefachim. What was that? 28 inches by 28 inches. It's a rather small box, smaller than a refrigerator box, maybe as small as a mini fridge. Those mini fridges, like that size box. And I hang sheets down to make it decorative because the cardboard is not so pretty. So I put something pretty to hang it. So it says, oh, that's going to diminish the size. Now, why did we just make this distinction between the walls being diminished versus the roof not being diminished? Any ideas? So I think the way the commentaries put this is like this: that the minimal size of the sukkah is literally the minimal size of the sukkah, what a person can fit into. Anything that diminishes that size invalidates the sukkah. But the height of a sukkah, the minimal height of a sukkah, is more for pleasantness than to be the actual size of what a person could fit in. Maybe a person could fit under 10 tefachim as well. It's just not pleasant. So if you make it pleasant by putting decorations in and it's still considered pleasant, then that's acceptable. Now the decorations would be acceptable if if it doesn't bother you when you go in. I don't know if you remember, there was a few pages back on page 4 on Daf Daled. If I made a sukkah that was exactly 10 tefachim, and there was branches that were sticking into the 10 tefachim. So Abaya thought that, well, let's take a look at how many branches there are. If it's more shade than sun in those branches, then it's invalid. If it's less shade, more sun than shade in those branches, then it's going to be kosher. And Rava, Rava is a contemporary of Abaya, he comments back to him. He says, no. That would be diras rucha. That would be uncomfortable. So branches sticking down into the sukkah would be uncomfortable. That would be invalidating sukkah. The decorations sticking down in the sukkah are not invalidating the sukkah. I guess it has to do with how comfortable it is. I bet Rava would show up over here and say, one second, what type of decorations are these? Are these decorations that are banging, flour that's spilling every time you bang it? Then that would probably be invalid. Rava doesn't come in to mention anything, but probably based on that Gemara, you would. There's a Gemara later also. It's actually a Rava as well. Gemara about a certain type of here it is. No, that's not it. It's not. It's going to be two pages later. It's not a Rava. It's a Abaya. Abaya says in 2 pages. He says that there's these little twigs that fall down and disturb you in the sukkah, then you can't use it for schach. So apparently he was accepting Rava's what Rava commented before, that the sukkah needs to be comfortable. And anything that's going to disrupt your comfort in the sukkah would invalidate it. So what Abaya didn't know on page 4, he knows on Daf Gimel. What Rava told him, that's how I would play it out. That it was in order that that conversation happened earlier. This conversation happened later. Over here, it must be that it's still going to be comfortable. Otherwise, it's going to come up. We're going to have that question of what's Abaya and Rava going to say about the discomfort that we spoke about on Daf Daled. Okay. One more Gemara, which I think we can finish it in the last 5 minutes. And I'll let Rabbi Smith, the real Rabbi Smith, I'll let him discuss it. But there's a lot to discuss on this following Gemara. But we could learn. We mentioned Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi was the one that differentiated between decorations on the roof and decorations on the wall. Decorations on the roof did not make a difference in the size of the sukkah. Decorations on the wall would diminish the size of the sukkah. Well, you mentioned Rav Ashi, Minyamin Avdei de Rav Ashi. Some people have the name Binyamin. This fellow had the name Minyamin. And he was the servant of Rav Ashi, maybe like a shamash or something. It's Mishale Ketunta B'maya. His cloak, maybe his coat, got soaked in water. The Ishtacha Metalasa, so he hung it out to dry over the sukkah. Metalasa is the Aramaic word for sukkah. A test in Aramaic is a tzaddik in Hebrew. So tzel, it's really it's on the shade. It's on this thing that gives shade, which is another word for a sukkah. So he hung it over the metalala. So he hung it over the sukkah. So it's there to dry. Now remember we said that there were some problems with hanging sheets over sukkahs. Well, Amalei Rav Ashi says dalye. Dalye means remove it. The English word delete. Well, dalye means remove. So he said remove it. I don't want anyone to say that we're using something that's makabel tuma, like a jacket, is clearly makabel tuma, that we're using jackets for schach. So it doesn't say who commented back to Rav Ashi, but it's either the Gemara or Binyamin himself. He says, but everyone can see that it's wet. Chazal is to see, like chazayin. Everyone can see that it's wet, and everyone see that it's wet. Everyone knows that it's not schach. They see that this is a clothesline. It's not schach. It says, well, I only meant when it dries off. When it dries off, you have to take it down. Now, what you need to discuss, what you need to analyze here was Rav Ashi just said that you can leave that on the sukkah. Was Rav Ashi going to eat in the sukkah while it was there, while it was wet? Did Rav Ashi think that the sukkah is kosher? Or maybe Rav Ashi wasn't going to eat there. He just said the whole issue wasn't eating in the sukkah. The issue was a marasayan issue of, I don't want anyone to say that Rav Ashi uses garments for schach. But he didn't consider it kosher either way. So there's some things here that aren't clear that have to be discussed. Let's leave it at that. And Yeshakayach, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Pleasure learning.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Yeah, you're very welcome. Have a great day.
Have a good day, everybody.
Okay. I have to ask a question. Do I leave or log out? What do I do here? Is this the last class? Do you have a follow-up class?
No.
So I turn off the Zoom.
Yeah, you can shut it off.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Have a great day, everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All the best. Bye.